I was chatting to a friend and remembered this creepy story from the pandemic. I, a 30-year-old female, lived alone. I had no car and no shops were nearby. It was about 9 p.m. and I'd gotten back from work and realized that there was no food in the house. So I ordered a grocery delivery on Uber Eats. I requested they leave it at the door due to COVID rules. And there was a knock at the door, and I saw a tall, skinny guy standing right by it. I shouted through the letterbox to leave it on the porch and back up. He said no, and that he had to hand it to me as it had alcohol in it. I hadn't ordered any alcohol, so I told him he had the wrong order. He claimed that it was correct. I told him sternly to put it on the porch and back up. Again, he refused. Stupidly, I was tired. I opened the door crack to tell him to do it due to the COVID rules, and he stepped toward the door and put his hand on the handle. I pulled it shut and shouted for him to leave or I was reporting him. He put it down and stepped back. I asked him through the letterbox to back up further. He did, but again, when I opened the door, he stepped forward. I remember the chill down my spine when he said, "Pretty, very pretty," in a low monotone voice. I noticed he had his phone out and pointed at me, and I asked what he was doing. He said he had to take a picture, but it was pointed at my face and not the bag on the floor. I grabbed the bag and slammed the door shut and locked it. I watched through a crack in the curtains as he stood by the door, pacing back and forth, as if he couldn't make up his mind. He knocked, but I didn't answer. I was getting seriously creepy vibes and called my best mate for advice. She told me to report him and to not open the door. I shouted out of the letterbox for him to leave, but he still stood there. My dog, who was normally the sweetest thing, had picked up on my anxiety and began barking at the door. Finally, he turned and got into his car that was parked across the street from my house. I kept watching for the next 10 or so minutes through my window, but he wouldn't leave. He just sat there. I hoped that maybe he was picking another order to take. Suddenly, a message popped up on Uber. He told me he'd forgotten the bag in the car and asked me to come get it. I checked my order and it was all there, so I messaged him saying it wasn't mine. He was insistent, saying he couldn't leave until I picked it up. He was practically begging me to come to the car, saying it wouldn't take but a minute and I can grab it from the passenger side. I lost my shit. I told him I had everything I'd ordered. I told him I'd heard what he said, saw that he was taking a picture of me and not the order, and I was calling the police. He still said I had to come get the bag. The entire time I was on the phone with the police, he was still messaging me, even saying, "The police aren't coming. Just come get the order and I'll leave. Why are you making it so hard?" The police told me that someone would be there within 20 minutes and to stay inside with the doors locked. My dog was going nuts, hackles up and barking. My neighbor's husband, who was 6'4" and built like a brick shithouse, texted saying he heard a commotion and asked if I was okay. I told him what was going on, and he immediately ran out, shouting at the guy, and told him to fuck off before he got fucked up. The delivery guy peeled out of there, and my neighbors came over to make me a brew and wait for the police. I filed a report to both the police and Uber, but all I got was an apology from Uber. And the police never came back to me. I got a car shortly after, and didn't use Uber again until my boyfriend moved in. So, creepy predatory Uber driver, let's not meet again. When I was 18, back in 2005, my mom was giving me a ride to work. My car had been impounded for something stupid, and I had to wait 30 days to get it back. In the meantime, my mom was giving me rides to work. On Saturdays, I worked morning shift, so I had to be at work by 5 a.m. This means we had to leave the house no later than 4:30. It was still dark outside, like pitch black, and very cold. And that morning, as my mom was driving, off in the distance, I could see a figure getting ready to cross the road, basically jaywalk in front of us. As we got closer, I could see it was a young girl. It looked like she didn't have any shoes on. A long white tee, like as she was wearing a man's white t-shirt. It was big on her. It looked like she had no pants on, but you could just barely see that she had these short jean shorts under the large shirt. Like the kind that used to be pants, but she cut them off herself. And like I said, she wasn't wearing shoes. My mom started talking shit, like, what kind of girl walks around the streets at this hour dressed like that? The girl was now walking in the middle of the street, extremely slow, to the point that my mom had to stop about 10 feet away from her, because now she was blocking us. And when my mom stopped, the girl came to a complete stop. But she wasn't facing us. She was facing the direction she was crossing, which was from my right to left. As we had gotten closer, I could see that her skin appeared to be bluish gray, and her hair was jet black. It looked wet and tangled, like she had just gotten out of the shower. My mom was about to honk at her when she slowly turns her head and looks right at us. Her hair was covering her face. She looked kinda like the girl from The Ring. And then, this part, I'll never forget. She slowly brushed the hair from her face, and she didn't have one. It was just all smooth, like Slenderman. No eyes, no mouth, and no nose. It just looked smooth. My mom started to have a panic attack. I literally felt my heart drop. I was now focused on calming my mom down. The girl looked at us for like 2 or 3 seconds, and then she took off running. It didn't move at irregular speeds or anything, just like regular running. I've never seen anything like that in my life. To this day, my mom and I can't explain what that was. I guess I'm sharing my story in hopes that maybe someone else has seen something similar. Something without a face. So I'm going to start by saying I'm basically a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. Although I love hearing stories and listening to others' point of view when it comes to that kind of stuff. This is why I'm having such a hard time understanding what happened to me last September. My dad, grandma, grandpa, and I were attending my cousin's wedding in a small rural town just outside of South Haven, Michigan, late last summer. We rented a small house in town, which was located in a very wooded area, just off of a small lake. Something felt extremely off as soon as I got out of the car at our rental property. That's the best way I could describe it. Something felt off, and I was immediately uneasy. But, being the skeptic that I am, I shrugged it off and chalked it up to being tired and anxious. The night we arrived, my dad and I were having a smoke outside and noticed how weird everything sounded. It was about 11 p.m., and there was no one else around. The trees were crackling incredibly loudly, and we were hearing strange animal noises, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Just the type of animal noises you'd hear in rural Michigan. But they just sounded particularly strange to us, for some reason that we couldn't distinguish. We said our goodnights and went to bed. The next morning, my dad told me that he went outside for a smoke about 2 a.m. and heard what sounded to him like someone close by banging on metal siding. He said it sounded like it was just next door, but didn't hear anything leading up to or preceding the loud banging, like footsteps or anything. We shrugged and laughed it off. The second night was when I had the experience that I still can't stop thinking about 6 months later. It was around 11 p.m. to maybe midnight, and I was having my last smoke of the night. My grandparents were already asleep, and my dad had just gotten into bed, but was still awake watching TV. I was sitting on the stairs outside with my back to the house, looking straight out into the backyard. I heard someone shout my name in a very abrupt manner, loud and fast. It sounded like they were shouting toward me from the front of the house, like they were standing on the front porch shouting for me, knowing I was in the back. It sounded just like my dad, but it couldn't have been him because I didn't hear the front door open or close or anything. Being a skeptic, I reminded myself to stay calm, and I quickly walked back into the house, and I found my dad sound asleep. There was no way that by the time I got to him, he could have gotten back into bed. I woke him up and asked him if he'd been outside, yelling my name. He looked confused and said of course not. I started to get really freaked out at that point. I tried to go to bed, but I couldn't get that scream out of my head. I was up all night trying to figure out what happened. I was honestly contemplating leaving and getting a hotel room somewhere close by and returning in the morning. Miraculously, I must have fallen asleep sometime around 3. We woke up the next morning, and I was so ready to get the hell out of that town. As soon as we left, the uneasy feeling I had the entire weekend completely disappeared. And this happened in 2016, when I accompanied my paternal uncle to Goddess Temple, located in Uttar Pradesh. My aunt had been stuck in labor for quite a while, and someone suggested that she may have fallen victim to a tantric ritual called bandhan, binding, that causes delay in childbirth. My uncle knew a priest in the temple who was considered to be adept in occult sciences and had reached out to him for help. We met the priest, who was dressed in a modest saffron robe and had an air of humbleness around him. I could never imagine what was going to happen in the next few hours. He confirmed that someone had done a Masani Kriya, or graveyard ritual, on my aunt, and if not reversed within time, it could end up in a miscarriage, or even death. We were horrified and couldn't believe what was being told to us, but he assured that she could be saved, provided that we started the yagya, or ceremonial fire, and other rituals on time. So, on the banks of River Ganges, he lit a ceremonial fire and asked us to keep putting oblations into the fire when told. The ritual went on for quite a while, when the strangest thing that I've ever experienced in my life happened. Suddenly, scores of subhuman creatures started coming from nowhere and began sitting around us in a circle. I can't describe exactly how they looked, but all of them were stunted and had deformed legs or hands, with pus oozing out of their wounds. They looked very similar to humans, but there was something otherworldly about them that I can't put my finger on. Now, my uncle is a very serious and grumpy guy, and with the situation at hand, wasn't in a good mood that day, obviously. I could see that he thought those creatures were beggars, and was about to tell them to bugger off, but the priest, who seemed unfazed by the bizarre situation, put a finger on his lips and gestured him to remain quiet. As the ritual was about to end, the creatures disappeared as strangely as they had arrived. After the ritual ended, the priest asked for a bit of time to dispose the residue of the yagya into the Ganges. Meanwhile, my uncle and I toured the entire temple to find out where those creatures could have gone, but it was in vain. When the priest returned, I asked him about what we had just seen. He explained that the spirits that were being used to torment my aunt had arrived to distract us from our ritual. Like humans, they are also attached to the earth and do not want to cross over. Had any one of us reacted or gotten up from our place, the ritual would have failed, and my aunt would have been doomed. And this is the reason he had gestured us to remain calm. Curiosity arose in my mind, and I asked him, "Have you ever seen God?" "No, but I have seen the devil," he said. I was bewildered to hear this, because, apart from the obvious vision of the devil himself, Satan is predominantly a Christian spirit, and this priest was an Orthodox Hindu. Moreover, the concept of Satan or Lucifer doesn't even exist in Hinduism. Before I became a priest, I was a Vamachari, or left-hand tantric, and had once gotten a chance to perform a ritual in an abandoned Christian graveyard. The specifics of the ritual are arcane, but you have to write a mantra on a piece of paper and make a wick out of it. The wick is then placed in an oil lamp and set alight. During midnight, 11 rounds of the mantra are to be recited in the graveyard while the wick is burning. Now, these demons do not like anyone trying to get power over them, and will do anything possible to distract you from the ritual. Sometimes you'll see maidens wearing garments strutting around the graveyard, and you'll hear their anklets tinkling. At other times, you'll hear the voices of your family screaming out for your help, babies crying, and other hallucinations. If you sit steadfast and perform the ritual for 21 continuous days and don't get distracted, the Prince of Demons, Satan himself, comes on the last day and begs for the oil left in the lamp. I describe Satan as being black, extremely hairy with horns, and walks with his hands and feet to the ground like an animal. This part is extremely treacherous, since it's a trap laid out by Satan to distract the practitioner. You have to give the oil to Satan, after which he'll tempt you to ask for anything that you want. If at this point you ask for anything, be it riches, women, or what have you, or refuse to give him the oil, you're doomed and will be forced to suffer from lunacy throughout the remainder of your life. The only acceptable request is to ask Satan to leave you alone so that you can complete your ritual in peace. Once the ritual is complete, you'll gain the ability to exorcise any demon with ease. At that point, my uncle's mobile rang. It was the midwife calling to inform that his son had been delivered safely. I wish I could tell you that attacks on my aunt ceased after this event, but they didn't. In the years to follow, my uncle would sometimes find pieces of dog bones tightly wrapped in red cloth scattered around the precarious corners of the house. But that is another story.